Can a neurotypical person understand the reality of a neurodivergent person? Well, that's a complex question, but in this video, I'm gonna try to give you some insights. I'm gonna divide the video in two parts. In the first one, I'm gonna give you a bit more theoretical baseline. I'm gonna shortly explain to you what theory of mind is. In part number two, I'm gonna give you 7 examples of how you, as an ADHD person, can communicate your experiences to a neurotypical person so that they can understand you better and you can improve your mutual communication and understanding. What is theory of mind? And sorry for the change of settings, but this part of the video had very messed up sounds, so I had to redo. Theory of mind is our ability to understand that other people have their own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and perspectives that may be different than ours. Imagine you're watching a movie, for example, and you know something that the main character doesn't know, and you know that they don't know it. So this is you using your theory of mind, and this usually develops as a skill in early childhood. One famous experiment that shows this is the Sally-Ann test, created by those psychologists whose name I'll probably mispronounce and I don't want to offend anybody. So read them for yourself, and this is how the test goes. So kids usually observe either dolls or real people, and one doll or a person is called Sally and the other one is called Ann. Sally has a marble and puts it in a basket. Then she leaves the room. While she's gone, Ann moves the marble to a box. The kids observe this interaction and then they are being asked, when Sally comes back, where will she look for the marble? Children with developed theory of mind say that Sally will look back in the basket because this is where Sally left it. They understand that their knowledge is different than Sally's because they have seen interactions such as Anne moving the marble to the box, which Sally hasn't seen. That understanding that I know something and my knowledge is not identical to yours is theory of mind and usually develops around age 4 and 5. But not everybody develops theory of mind and not everybody develops it to the same extent. For example, back in the 80s, when this test was done for the first time, it had shown that children diagnosed with autism get the test wrong 80% of the time. So they say that Sally will come back and will look in the box for the marble. And it had been generally assumed that people with autism have more difficulties anticipating what people will say, will do, and how people will feel. Now, as much as it's true that people with autism sometimes have difficulties understanding social cues, the way this test had been done could also be part of the problem because people who are neurodivergent are wired differently. They see the world differently. They perceive it differently. So they may need to be asked the same question a different way in order for them to understand exactly what you're asking them and for them to answer accurately. So it does not necessarily mean they don't get what happened or they don't have theory of mind. It may mean that the way the question is asked, they don't perceive it the same way. In general, there is this replication crisis in psychology, meaning a lot of the research done back in the days does not replicate with the same result now. But regardless of all of this, the basic assumption is that neurotypical people are on average better at theory of mind. Yet, I would say that people in general struggle to understand other people's point of view. Hence this video and hence the second part of this video where I'm going to show you examples of how you could present your reality to those around you and help them understand you. And this beginning that I wanted to disclose to you, the theory of mind concept, is just to remind you how difficult it can be for people to put themselves in your shoes, even for you to put yourself in other people's shoes. When you have not experienced something, it is very easy to see everything through your own lenses. So be patient with that. Don't expect to just give one example and be understood clearly right away. People may want to understand you and yet need time in order to be successful at that. That's my message here. Let's jump to the second part of the video. So how can somebody with ADHD explain their experiences, thought, and ways of doing things to somebody who is neurotypical? Well, I'm gonna give you 7 approaches with specific examples that you can use right away. Approach number 1 will be as simple as share your daily experiences. Share how a typical day goes for you and what specific challenges you have in such a typical day. For example, you can say something like this: when I sit down to work, I often get distracted by small things around me, like a bird outside the window or an interesting thought that pops into my head. It is not that I don't want to focus, it is that my brain keeps shifting gears. Second will be to explain your cognitive processes, and I really mean the way you do things, the way you function, not trying to be an expert on the topic. Just because you have ADHD, it doesn't mean you're a psychologist or psychiatrist who has all the knowledge about the condition itself. So try something simple. For example, for me, tasks don't always have a sense of urgency unless there's a looming deadline. And the hyper-focus I get at the last minute is how I manage to get things done, even though it's stressful. And to this you can add that when you get things done, you don't have a sense of achievement or excitement. You have a sense of relief. For you as an ADHD person, getting tasks done is finally, I don't have to worry about it anymore. It's done. For a neurotypical person, getting things done is like achievement. It's like, I feel good, I feel better, I feel more energized. And now I feel ready to get even more things done. And because this is their perspective, sometimes they look at you not doing much and kind of not understanding why the heck wouldn't you just get up and get something done, because this will make you feel better. That's their perspective that they project on you. So if you explain to them that for you, achieving things does not give the same result, you feel completely differently after that, this can actually help them understand why you're really not motivated sometimes, because you already know that even if you find the motivation inside you, you may not feel better at the end of the day. It's not going to be such a clear, positive outcome as it is oftentimes for neurotypical people. A third approach will be to use analogies and metaphors. If you want to communicate a more complex experience, then making it more relatable through analogy to something that is already familiar to the other person can obviously help them put themselves into your position. For example, you can say something like this: imagine trying to read a book while sitting in the middle of a busy, noisy street. That's what it feels like for me to concentrate in a quiet office when my mind is racing with thoughts. A neurotypical person knows what it feels to be overwhelmed, to be crammed with thoughts, to be exhausted. But they feel this way when the environment obviously makes them feel this way. For you, it's all in your head sometimes. So creating that bridge from how they usually feel in certain situations and telling them, this is how I actually feel even without this environment, it's just how I am, can really help them understand you. Fourth approach will be to discuss your communication preferences. And I would say that this is one of the most useful approaches, no matter what is your communication preference or what is your condition. Even if you're a neurotypical person, usually people have preferred methods to receive information. When you have ADHD, a very typical situation is that you hear auditory information as gibberish. You don't really understand verbal instructions that well. So a way to communicate this to a neurotypical person could sound something like this: I find written instructions easier to follow than verbal ones because I can refer back to them whenever I need. Verbal instructions often get lost in my thoughts. And to make it even more specific, two of the most common situations when you receive verbal instructions and you completely block as an ADHD person and you don't get any input out of what has been said to you is when you ask for directions or when you want to play a board game together with your friends and they're teaching you the rules. So let's go first with directions. How can you communicate your needs to your neurotypical friends? When you give me directions to a new location, if you tell me turn left at the coffee shop, then go straight until you see a red house and then take a right, well, in fact, I will remember only the first step. The rest will fade into a a blur because my mind struggles to hold onto sequential verbal information. Instead, if you write down the directions or provide a map, I can refer back to it whenever I need, ensuring I don't get lost. And trust me, you don't have to repeat this very often to the same friend. Once people understand something, they remember it better. So make the effort once or twice and it's gonna pay off. Oh, and let me give you an example if you're trying to learn a new board game with your friends. If you're trying to teach me a new board game, verbal explanations might sound like gibberish. My mind cannot easily process and retain spoken rules, especially if they are complex or lengthy. Letting me read the instructions on my own gives me the chance to go at my own pace and then reread sections when I need it, because I need to fully understand the game before I can start playing. A lot of people with ADHD are very good at seeing connections, seeing patterns between things. So when you're learning a new game, you cannot really learn rule by rule. You need to see the whole thing first and kind of connect the dots in order to get the picture of that game, and then you can start playing and actually enjoying your time. Approach number 5 is also very relatable to a lot of people with ADHD, and this is that you have sensory sensitivities. So highlight them to your neurotypical friends. Explain to them that you find certain environments and stimuli to affect you more than other people. For example, bright lights and loud noises can be overwhelming for me. In a busy environment, it is hard for me to focus because my brain is trying to process all the sensory input at once. If you have ADHD, you probably do not want to have the big light turned on. You prefer something dimmed, something less bright. You probably don't want to go to an EDM concert either. Communicate those things to your friends instead of letting them guess, because they're probably gonna fail at that. Approach number 6 is similar to approach 1. One was share a typical day in your life and a typical challenge that you meet frequently. 6 is share your personal stories. Storytelling is a skill. ADHD people struggle with storytelling because you want to say one thing, then you have random associations and your mind goes into 5 other directions. So you may want to think about it, but the whole point is that people understand through stories. Culture, social norms, religion, those are all stories. Think about also when you read fiction book. Let's say you read Harry Potter. Have you ever been at Hogwarts? No, but it almost feels as you've been there because you read the story as if you were part of it. Stories are very important. They're powerful ways to communicate your point of view. So this is something that sounds very easy at first and is actually challenging to achieve. So think about it. I'm gonna give you one example. One day I was working on an important project at home. I set a reminder for an important online meeting at 2 p.m. As I got deeper into my project, I entered a state of hyperfocus. Time flew by and I was completely immersed into my work. By the time I looked up, it was already 3 p.m. and I had missed the meeting entirely. It wasn't that I didn't care about the meeting. It's just that when I get deeply focused on something, I lose track of time. This is common experience for many people with ADHD, where hyperfocus can lead to losing awareness of everything else around us. And probably the most important audience for you to communicate specifically the issue with hyperfocus is your closest people, because when you enter hyperfocus, you probably neglect messages or calls, and those people feel ignored. And it's difficult even for ADHD people to be in that position because we tend to have rejection sensitive dysphoria, which means we feel rejection by the anticipation of the rejection. And I can talk about this in another video, but understanding how hyperfocus works does not prevent you from feeling neglected even when you are on the receiving side of the hyperfocus. Now imagine when you're not even having hyperfocus and having to understand why the heck your spouse, your son, your best friend ignored you because they were in hyperfocus. It's difficult. So yes, work on your story, but also allow for them to take time understanding this. It's not very easy for people who do not have certain experience to understand it. And finally, approach number 7, that is probably common sense, but we often forget about it. And this is to encourage people to ask us questions about what they still don't understand. But here, carefully with this, because you don't want to tell your friend or family member, hey, ask me whatever you would like to know about ADHD. You're not an expert necessarily, and you don't necessarily understand yourself very well. So you don't want to be put on the spotlight explaining ADHD when you don't know fully what ADHD is sometimes. You can talk about your experiences. So ask your friends, family to ask you about your experiences and to ask you when they don't understand certain behavior, so that maybe you can explain your logic. I hope now things make a bit more sense, and now you have some tools that you can use, some specific examples, sentences. Maybe this is a video that you can even share with friends. I hope it was useful. At the end of the day, it's all about not just reminding you that you're not alone in your struggles, because you're not, but also helping you somehow manage those struggles. It's not possible to find the magic wand that is gonna erase your problems, it's gonna rewire your brain. It's more about finding support that will work differently on different days and with different people. It's good to be realistic about it, but there are ways to make things better. Keep exploring, keep trying, and surely some of those things will work for you. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.